Okay, folks, will be some more of us coming in. This afternoon we have kicking off with a panel, Better Buying Power and Affordability, both of which need to be stressed. This is one of these mixed media panels, and Brigadier General Retired Tom Goodcoop is now a principal at Booz Allen in Hamilton, and he's going to, I'll let him explain the intricacies of what's going to happen here and introduce his panel and turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, General Sullivan. Again, welcome. This afternoon's panel that I'll moderate is the Better Buying Power and Affordability. The panel today will be distributed. The Honorable Shue, Ms. Miller, and Lieutenant General Phillips are attending a DoD offsite, but they'll participate via VTC, while Major General Green and Mr. Fahey will participate here on stage. Honorable Shue's presentation is on videotape. There are full bios of our panelists in the program, but I'll provide a few highlights for your knowledge. First, the Honorable Heidi Shue is the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. Prior to joining the Secretariat, she spent many years in the defense industry in a wide range of science and acquisition programs. Representing her today in D.C. is her primary civilian deputy, Mr. Gabe Camarillo. Next, Ms. Mary Miller is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Technology. Prior to this assignment, Ms. Miller served in multiple assignments in PEO Soldier and other research and development executive positions in the government. Bill Phillips is the Military Deputy and Director of the Army Acquisition Corps Office in the Office of the ASALT. He's also served in multiple senior acquisition assignments in Iraq, Picatinny Arsenal, the Pentagon. In addition, he's also served in the G8. To my right, Major General Harry Green is the Deputy for Acquisition and Systems Management in the Office of the ASALT. Before this, he served as a PEO, IEWS, and other senior acquisition positions, as well as in the Army G8 also. Finally, to my far right, Mr. Kevin Fahey is currently the PEO for Combat Support and Combat Service Support. Previously, he served as a PEO for Ground Combat Systems and many other senior positions in the Acquisition Corps. Welcome all. I think you'll find the remarks on the DoD Better Buying Power and its relation to the current fiscally constrained environment relevant and informative. We'll begin with a tape presentation by the Honorable Shue, followed by the presentations by each of the other panel members.
AUSA's Institute of Land Warfare Winter Symposium. I regret that I could not attend in person this year, and I want to thank AUSA for allowing me to be there virtually. This event provides the Army, the defense industry, and all stakeholders a valuable opportunity each year to exchange ideas and communicate priorities within our collective efforts to empower and protect our soldiers. In many ways, the need for such exchange is greater this year than ever before. So I am grateful to AUSA for making this participation possible today. I am joined today by a group of distinguished colleagues. Lieutenant General Bill Phillips, my military deputy at ASALT. General Green, Major General Harry Green, Deputy for Acquisition and System Management. Mr. Kevin Fahey, Program Executive Officer for Combat Support and Combat Services Support. Ms. Mary Miller, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Technology. I would also like to thank retired Brigadier General Thomas Goodcoop from Booz Allen, who graciously agreed to moderate today's session. This year's panel focuses on the Department's continued success in achieving better buying power to the benefits of our soldier and our overall efforts to foster a much-needed emphasis on affordability and cost in acquisition logistics and technology. Our efforts in this area over the past 3 years have been amplified by the recognition that available resources for the Department will see a decline. Today's discussion rightly calls attention to the Army's notable successes in implementing better buying power and our continued commitment to these principles. However, this discussion also juxtaposes two strikingly different approaches to reduced investments. One approach, reflected in better buying power, reflects our shared belief that improved emphasis on sound management and planning will enable us to stretch resources for maximum benefit to the warfighter. We have implemented a number of innovations that conserve precious taxpayer dollars, ranging from should-cost initiatives that save money in the execution of our acquisition programs to multi-year production contracts that achieve greater efficiency and lower unit costs. The other approach, which I will discuss later in my presentation, is reflected in the steep and sudden $12 billion estimated cut to the Army's current year spending that's brought about by sequestration and the prospect of a year-long continuing resolution in FY13. This approach is the very antithesis of sound management and planned investment that we have stressed in the past couple of years. The impacts of fiscal uncertainty, which are now upon us, threatens to undo much of this significant work. Let me talk about recent successes and ongoing priorities. Since I joined the Army in 2010, there has been wide acceptance of the need for the Army and the Department resources to decline from the wartime highs in the last decade. Better buying power and the embrace of efficiencies were designed to enable the Army to implement management approaches that protect our ability to deliver needed soldier capabilities now and into the future. The reality is that the Army's acquisition community must continue to prioritize several key missions regardless of the current and projected fiscal outlook. These include, first and foremost, support for ongoing combat operations and soldiers' needs in Afghanistan. The needs and safety of our troops remain our top priority and focus. Another ongoing priority is a planned retrograde of equipment from Afghanistan. Planned for completion by the end of 2014, the retrograde will present significant logistical challenges to the Army as we undertake the accountability and transfer of large volumes of weapon systems and equipment used over the course of 12 years of war. In addition, efforts to reset and modernize our inventory of equipment will call for renewed emphasis in conjunction with a drawdown, since much of the equipment used in war needs repair. Modernization of equipment unused in the wide-area security missions of Iraq and Afghanistan was deferred to focus on the war effort. Aging platforms like our Bradleys, M113s, and the M109 Paladin howitzers are due for modernization and replacement to ensure that the Army's readiness to meet future security needs in a network combat environment. All of this work must be done, so we have worked diligently to ensure that we make the best use of increasingly scarce public resources, which we regard as public trust. Better buying power is designed to help us to do that, and it continues to be implemented across the Army. This initiative, started by now Deputy Secretary of Defense Carter and Undersecretary of Defense Kendall, really owes its inception to what Frank Kendall refers to as the embrace of a cost-conscious culture across the department. Initially announced in 2010, we focused on implementing a series of initiatives aligned to 5 focus areas: targeting affordability and controlling cost growth, incentivizing productivity and innovation in industry, reducing non-productive processes and bureaucracy, promoting real competition, and improving tradecraft in acquisition of services. The Army has achieved significant success in implementing better buying power since 2010, as evidenced in the following examples. First, we targeted affordability and cost growth in a variety of acquisition programs across the Army. 2010 signaled a shift of our approach in managing costs of large, major defense acquisition programs. Under better buying power, we mandated affordability as a requirement, which facilitated trade space in systems performance based upon cost targets. We utilized this approach to develop affordable approaches on several programs. In the Ground Combat Vehicle, or GCV, we established tiered requirements for the technology demonstration phase of the program to provide industry with maximum flexibility to meet cost targets in system designs. Efforts to refine vehicle requirements for GCV have emphasized support for an affordable and executable program in the long term. We also accomplished this in the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle program. This program's TD phase was used to demonstrate the integration of mature technologies as a complete system. The results were used to refine a set of achievable requirements through the use of cost-informed trades in close partnership with the Army and the U.S. Marine Corps' user communities. This effort allowed the Army to reduce the subsequent EMD phase's length from 48 months to 33 months and to challenge contractors to reduce the manufacturing costs to meet our target cost goal of $250K per unit. This is an example of what we need to continue to do in all of our programs. We also emphasize costs in our implementation of better buying power should cost initiatives, which strives for best value for the warfighter by challenging our program managers to manage programs to lower costs. Low cost is the initial baseline or expected cost of a program, whereas the should cost is a lower cost achieved through successful implementation of efforts that's designed to improve efficiency. Should cost analysis has been conducted on Army programs even at the ACAT 2 and 3 levels. The Army, by the way, is the only service that has conducted should cost as ACAT 3 level. These are the programs with the tightest budgets, so efforts to achieve affordability makes a significant difference for us. Some of the key examples of should cost implementation include Stryker. The Army achieved considerable cost savings as we combined the double V-hull and the MBCRV vehicle buys while pursuing efficiency that's gained in test methodology. Existing test data was effectively utilized and test events were combined to achieve the efficiencies. The enhanced performance round is another example. We accelerated cost reduction efforts in the ammunition production process, use of a common bullet cup, development of a high-speed cold heading process, and the decision to conduct production at Lake City Ammo Plant has resulted in significant savings. The Patriot PAC-3 savings were achieved through the modifications to FY12 production contract. In addition, we've taken significant steps to incentivize productivity and efficiency. Examples include our dedicated efforts to secure multi-year contracts that lower unit cost and provide some measure of stability to industry in terms of forecasting production. The successful execution of multi-year production contracts for the delivery of 181 Chinook and 537 Black Hawk aircrafts have lowered the procurement cost by $700 million. Humvee savings of $286 million were achieved through negotiated contracts that lowered the unit cost by greater than 15%. Family of medium tactical vehicles is another example of multi-year competition savings that total $578 million. The Joint Tactical Radio System, or JITR system, represents an area where increased competition among commercial vendors is expected to achieve significant cost savings. These are just a few examples of the innovative approaches to acquisition that the Army has embraced recently. Our distinguished panelists will provide additional examples on what we have already talked about and learned from these approaches. Finally, contracting is an area where we have made significant strides over the past couple of years. First, the Army has embraced Better Buying Power's call for renewed emphasis on sensible contracting strategies that support the best value to the soldier. Given the breadth of contracting activity that's distributed across major commands, we have instituted a process to review metrics, performance, and assess trends across the Army. The contracting leads of each organization now meet a couple of times a year to share the lessons learned and discuss how to handle the challenges that we face. We also use this process to promote accountability for the Army-wide policies and priorities. So building upon these efforts, what we have learned in recent years is that dedicated emphasis on affordability and sound management results in tangible progress. But we have much work that remains. Looking ahead, we are working to implement the department's latest iteration of Better Buying Power, known as 2.0, which builds upon success over the past couple of years. Better Buying Power 2.0 calls for new initiatives to improve the professionalism of acquisition workforce. It reforms to incentivize productivity and innovation in industry, controls costs throughout the product life cycle, and promotes improved tradecraft in the acquisition of services. One key Better Buying Power 2.0 initiative calls for instituting a system of investment planning to derive affordability targets in acquisition programs. This initiative aligns with the strategic modernization planning effort that I described at the AUSA last fall, which is currently underway. To help us prepare to make smart investment decisions for the future, particularly in a resource-constrained environment, we need to map out the Army's long-term plan for equipment modernization based upon current resource assumptions and priorities. So to make the most effective use of limited resource on Army priorities, we needed to coordinate planned investments to achieve a state of enduring readiness to respond to emerging threats. We needed a process to prioritize and balance pressing modernization needs for soldier equipment and development of new capabilities. That is why it is essential to link our science and technology investments to future capabilities. We're in the midst of linking our S&T investments to future technology insertions into our programs of records by identifying critical enabling technologies that will bring the next generation of capabilities to solve our capability gaps. The goal of this effort is to align our S&T projects with requirements developers and PEOs to support and facilitate the transfer of technologies into existing and planned future acquisition programs. In this physically constrained environment, we must place emphasis into S&T areas that tackles truly Army unique challenges and collaborate across services, national labs, academia, partner nations to solve our common challenges. We will share our roadmap with industry so that we can leverage their IRAD investments. We're also developing a tool to enable us to understand the linkages in S&T investment to future capabilities. This will enable us to understand the impact of our S&T investment decisions. We've learned a great deal over the past decade regarding underbody blasts and IEDs, and have developed and implemented rapid solutions. We need to have long-term S&T investment to address emerging sophisticated threats, especially as disruptive technologies proliferate and become more accessible worldwide. The defense budget will not grow to accommodate the diverse set of challenges that's presented in the foreseeable future. So we need to make deliberate investment choices today to maximize our capabilities in the future. Our strategic modernization planning will enable us to do that. I have asked our PEOs and PMs to lay out the long-term modernization plans based upon equipment life cycle projections and to incorporate sustainment costs and planning into their assessment. These include the extent to which equipment utilization, obsolescence, and sustainment costs drive the need for upgraded capability. Our strategic modernization planning efforts will provide us a collective roadmap for Army capabilities now and into the future. It will reflect a clear sense of priorities in an era of fiscal austerity and will guide investment decisions at a time when we have to make tough choices. This investment planning will provide the necessary framework within which we can set evolving equipment investment priorities and adjust to future resource constraints. The benefits to industry from these efforts cannot be estimated. I've been told by numerous CEOs that long-term planning is absolutely essential to industry's ability to prepare its own plans for their IRAD investment. The outcomes of our strategic modernization planning will help us to communicate these areas of priority investments. As we work together to confront these challenges, we must continuously embrace innovative thinking, creative solutions, and a willingness to challenge established institutional processes to truly achieve better buying power for our soldiers. We look to industry for creative proposals to deliver affordable capabilities that meets Army requirements, as well as other ideas that improve the efficiency and sound management of our investments. We're interested in learning more about how we can use management tools and metrics from the private sector to optimize the performance of our organic industrial base. We're charged with responsibility with providing capabilities that the Army must retain. The organic industrial base has capably met these needs of a nation at war over the past decade. As we adopt to a post-war period, we will look to creative ways to preserve critical skills and institutional capabilities in the organic industrial base. While this may appear to be an ambitious agenda, it is urgent that we undertake this advance in terms of the gathering storm that's gathering today. As we see, there's significant changes that's imposed by our fiscal situation that's already upon us. The current fiscal uncertainty of sequestration and a possible full-year continuing resolution threatens to undermine our current efforts to implement cost-effective strategies in our acquisition programs. Our operations and maintenance funding, our OMA shortfalls, will place a significant stress on our acquisition workforce. The department is considering furloughs even as projected workload is increasing, particularly in the area of contracting. I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight some of the impacts that's caused by the fiscal uncertainty. As many of you know, the impacts stem from reductions brought about sequestration under the Budget Control Act and the effects of a year-long continuing resolution in the absence of appropriation for the Department of Defense. The effects of our current fiscal uncertainty include reductions and shortfalls broadly impacting Army acquisition in the current fiscal year to include a $6.3 billion reduction in the Army OMA, which represents approximately 51% of the amounts that's subject to sequestration in FY13. We're also faced a shortfall of funds that's attributed to a potential year-long CR, which amounts to $6 billion in base funding shortfalls. In addition, the Army faces a significant reduction of $2.6 billion in Army procurement accounts that's applied equally across over 450 Army programs. Finally, $890 million in RDT&E investments across the Army will also be reduced. Every Army acquisition program will be affected by the cuts that's imposed under the sequestration. Schedules for RDT&E funded programs will be extended by periods ranging anywhere between 6 weeks to 18 months. Procurement programs will experience funding cuts by 10 to 15%. The impacts to the industrial base will be significant. The impact of sequestration and a year-long CR could result in 16,000 jobs lost or not realized, which affects 39 states and the District of Columbia. 13 states may likely incur job losses greater than 300 employees. And these reductions will impact more than 300 companies doing business with the Army and more than 1,000 suppliers. The $890 million in reduction to RDT&E account may result in the closure of some of the DoD's high-performance computing centers. It will impact grants in partnership with universities and other affiliated research institutions. The potential loss of critical expertise through indiscriminate budget cuts jeopardizes unique skill sets that are critical to our Army's future. Moreover, the broad effects of sequestration will significantly impact the acquisition workforce in several areas. Its implementation will likely result in significant efforts to terminate or modify a large number of existing or pending Army contracts. The increased burden on the contracting workforce charged with helping the armies achieve the best value executing contracts in a timely manner will be significant. Additionally, the effects of these reductions on our program baselines, the unit cost, and long-term program execution will extend beyond the current fiscal year. Each program that's affected by cuts will encounter greater susceptibility to future delays and costs as PMs are asked to take on greater risks in programs. To absorb these reductions, current year activities and procurement buys will be delayed or reduced to meet sequestration targets. with no assurance that funding will be restored in the future years. These changes will extend program schedules, increase our unit costs, and add to our program's overall risk next year and beyond. In short, the impacts of sequestration on Army acquisition cannot be overstated, nor can they be fully assessed at this time. Both realities regarding our present challenges are equally disconcerting. Compounding our difficulties is the effect of a year-long CR and the limitation it will impose on the execution of our acquisition program. A year-long CR delays the commencement of 6 new START programs, including the following example. In aviation, the Army will be unable to award the Chinook program multi-year contract or procure the planned quantities of the Apache helicopter, which increases in unit costs. In addition, the Army was unable to commence efforts to include the Paladin PIM modification LRIP production, and it impacts the General Fund Enterprise Business System, GFIPS, efforts that's critical to our ability to meet auditability timelines. These impacts illustrate the very real consequences of the fiscal challenges that we face this year. Though Deputy Secretary of Defense Carter recently observed that the wolf is at the door, it is my hope that these impacts can still be averted. The Army and the Department are making real progress in managing our public resources in a manner that's consistent with the best tradition of good stewardship and dedication to our soldiers. I will hope that the Army and the industry receives the opportunity to stay the course and see through the benefits of better buying power and sound management that I have discussed today. Thank you very much.
We'll next hear from Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Thank you for AUSA for inviting me to speak on this panel. Ms. Hsu spoke to you about the work that we have been undertaking to develop a 30-year strategic modernization plan. She explained exactly why we believe that this type of plan is important, especially now during this time of fiscal uncertainty. What she didn't relay was how this desire to establish a more strategic assessment to better enable the Army now and in the future has been a challenge to the standard processes common within the Department of Defense. We are used to, even comfortable with, developing a plan that spans 5 years, the Program Operating Memorandum, or POM as we call it. The entire budget process and program strategy revolves around the POM. This short-term look allows us to project with a fair level of certainty what we are doing in the next 5 years. But what it doesn't allow is the ability to make informed decisions with knowledge of how these same decisions impact the Army of the future. So the desire to look more holistically across the life cycle of programs and make better decisions was a key driver to establishing a new process within the Department of the Army. This process is 5 months in the making. And while causing a lot of headaches and stress along the way, it has started to make an impact on how people think. This is culture change. And as those of you who have experienced it know, it is hard. Any effective Army strategy starts with an understanding of the national military strategy, joint warfighting concepts, and both current and future threat environments. With these as the backbone, the Army's Training and Doctrine Command develops Army concepts, how we fight in a joint context, against which they then identify and prioritize capability gaps. And they have done this on a yearly basis. However, this past October, we initiated a new process, the Long Range Investment Analysis, or LRIA, to lay out what we are doing over the course of the next POM plus 30 years. This was a collaborative effort between the PEOs, the S&T community, the requirements community, and the Army GA, our resource sponsor, to lay out our acquisition program plans and begin to identify potential opportunity for technology or capability insertions over a much longer time frame. It was during this phase of the assessment that we began to see where we had inadvertently created an unaffordable alignment of activities, such as multiple major combat platforms undergoing engineering change proposals within the same 2 to 3 year time frame, or unreasonable alignments, such as planned technology upgrades to systems that had already transitioned into sustainment. With that information in mind, we have the basis for making some decisions now that will keep the Army in balance for more than just the POM cycle. The LERA process didn't stop there, however. We have taken on another phase of the LERA S for sustainment. In this phase, we are again looking at the programs of records by highlighting when they should be entering sustainment. This is helping the Army stay within its top line and still maximize capabilities for the warfighter. Often we are asked, why 30 years? There's no possible way that a projection out 30 years will be accurate. To that I say, you are right. However, going out 30 years forces folks to think beyond the easy answer of just doing what they are doing now, but just for longer. It forces a new look at what else might need to happen. The world of 2040 to 2045 is clearly not going to look like the world of today. The threats and capabilities to address those threats may in fact look very different than what we have fielded. This exercise forces us to look at those eventualities. This new way to approach our planning has put rigor into the analysis and forces the communities who pay for the development of material and the long-term sustainment of material to work together to maximize the Army's capabilities over time. From an S&T perspective, it clearly starts to inform the community as to when technology is needed and insertion as part of a planned upgrade. It also cues us as to when to start investing for replacement platforms. A great example of that is our aviation portfolio, where we are conducting the S&T underpinnings of the next program of record planned to replace both the AH-64 Apache and the UH-60 Blackhawk. The Army S&T community has already initiated the Joint Multi-Role Technology Demonstrator effort as the foundation for the Army's future vertical lift medium program of record. This demonstrator program will create 2 flying prototypes that will help inform requirements for the FVL medium, as well as define what should be asked for within the request for proposal. The S&T Tech Demo is being well coordinated with PO Aviation and the Aviation Center of Excellence at Fort Rucker to ensure that we are working a solution that will fit and inform the Army's needs. Aside from the obvious benefit achieved by laying out the Army's programs and seeing where we may have generated unrealizable fiscal challenges, it has reinvigorated the relationships and strengthened the ties between the S&T community and their PEO partners. We have had significant engagements over these past 5 months, working to identify technical opportunities and the potential assertion of new capabilities across this 30-year time frame. Ms. Hsu took the opportunity to summarize what she has heard in the many briefings and discussions that she has taken over the past 2.5 years in the Army as to what we would lack, for lack of a better term, amount to some enduring challenges that the Army faces. You've been looking at those on the chart that's being shown now. These challenges include the obvious, the need for better force protection, to the less obvious, the need for improved operational energy. All are consistent, however, with the message that we have gotten from the Training and Doctrine Command over the past decade. These are challenges that remain ever relevant to the Army and its ability to conduct the fight. The S&T enterprise, working with the PEO community, has started to show how their efforts and initiatives are aligned to addressing these challenges. We are in the process of developing roadmaps for each challenge area that show the PEO program of record strategy and what S&T is underway or planned to be ready for insertion into their programs. Next chart, please. This chart shows one of the capability roadmaps we have developed, and it's just a snippet of what we have been doing. In this example, we are addressing operational maneuver, specifically in the context of our science and technology air portfolio activities and investments. The programs of record are depicted at the top of this roadmap and show where these programs are in their life cycle over time. The S&T activities are shown on the bottom half of the chart and identify those technologies being developed for insertion into new platform capability. This alignment is being done for all the programs of record across the breadth of the enduring challenges. Just last week, we spent 12 hours briefing Ms. Hsu on just a small part of this portfolio. So as you can well imagine, it's complicated. This new process, this culture change that Ms. Hsu has asked the Army to enact, has provided an opportunity for the development of a synchronized modernization program that is nested within both the Army and national military strategies and balances across the near, mid, and far-term investments. This is an effort that will be designed from inception to meet the Army's top challenges and address the breadth of threats that we face now and in the future, enabling us to provide the right capability to the warfighters at the right time. I would presume by now you're asking yourselves, where do I fit and how can I help the Army be more strategic in its planning? Next chart. It is important to remember that the Army's mission is broad in scope, that we must address not only a changing world environment, but also emerging threats, all within a declining budget. If we learned something over these past years of warfare, it is that we don't corner the market on good ideas. We will need to leverage the investments of others more than ever to ensure that the Army remains dominant. In the future, we will look to invest in those critical capabilities that are Army unique and leverage other people's investments everywhere else. Next chart. To that end, the Army wants to gain knowledge from industry about those IRAD efforts that can contribute to solutions for high-priority challenges. From smaller business, we want to know what technologies can contribute to solutions for challenges. And from academia, what game-changing research can contribute to avoiding challenges in the future. The current situation is that such exchanges are fragmentary at best, especially given these tough fiscal times. But we know that regular exchanges would strengthen the Army's science and technology program and aid industry in planning future research. We are looking into improving this situation, and I would offer the Defense Innovation Marketplace website as a good start. You'll see it's on the top of this chart. This website was established by OSD to facilitate exchange on information relating to government programs. Specifically, it provides DoD's research goals and priorities to industry and industry's research projects to the DoD. If you get a chance, you should check it out. Where we can always use help in persistent areas of need for the Army, stressing affordability, reduced size, weight, and power requirements. We look to industry and academia to help us in those areas that are Army unique, such as lightweight, more affordable armor, power, sensors, seekers, better energetic materials that meet the environmental and insensitive munition constraints that we must adhere to, new ways to process large amounts of data and manage information flow across the networks, especially as it relates to getting information down to the tactical edge, the soldier. And as Ms. Hsu pointed out, we are also looking to make sure that we can maintain our capabilities in a contested environment. In that context, we're talking countermeasures to make sure we are fully capable. And that's just the start of what we're looking for you to help us with. Again, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, albeit virtually, to share a little bit about the development of the Strategic Modernization Plan that will help the Army leadership make better and more informed decisions now and in the future. This is a great time to be in the Army, an Army that is clearly looking towards the future and taking care of the soldiers today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. We'll now hear from General Phillips.
Well, Tom, thank you. It indeed is an honor to be here with you today. For all of us here with you virtually, we would very much like to be there with you in person, because I just checked the weather before we walked in, and the wind chill today is 27 degrees in Washington, D.C. So we would like to, I heard it was 70 degrees down there, so great stuff. Hey, General Sullivan, I want to thank you and AUSA for once again inviting us to be a key part of this event. It's important for our Army, and most importantly, it's important for our soldiers. So thanks for your leadership and for AUSA's leadership and for Tom Goodcoop for actually chairing this panel today. Honored to be here with my teammates, Mr. Camarillo and Ms. Miller, as well as Kevin Fahey and Major General Harry Green there. For Tom Goodcoop, I have to counsel you on who you're hanging out with, that being Kevin Fahey and Harry Green today. So my comments this morning are going to follow some of the key comments that Ms. Hugh made, and as Ms. Miller has already laid out. So I'm going to mention a couple of things. One is affordability and executability in our programs coming forward, and how that ties into better buying power. And the last topic that I'll mention just briefly will be test efficiencies and all the things that we're doing today across many programs to drive efficiencies. So our first question to those that are out there is if you have not seen the 13 November memo that Mr. Kendall signed November 12th, that sort of laid out the draft memo that laid out Better Buying Power 2.0 and some of the initiatives behind it and the draft chart that defined 2.0, I would highly encourage you to go back and take a look at that, because it really defines how Mr. Kendall and how Ms. Hugh will look at all the programs that come forward through a lens of really two key areas. It's affordability and it's executability. If you look at the one chart, you'll see 7 key areas on that chart that are covered. Ms. Hugh spoke about that. But it boils down, in my view, to 2 key things. And as I mentioned, that's affordability and executability. And that's what the Army and Army acquisition under Ms. Hugh's leadership is driving toward, creating a culture of affordability and executability within our programs and within the thought process of our many PMs that are working out there and our contracting officers as well. The Army acquisition community, I can assure you, is fully immersed in a number of ongoing improvements. You've seen some of those recently in the last 2 or 3 years, but it centers around affordability that involves streamlining requirements early. GCV and JLTV were mentioned earlier. Those are great examples. Incentivizing industry to be more innovative and to bring forward strategies that the Army can leverage as we execute programs. Competition is a key part of that, as well as rewarding the industry for technological maturity in some of the programs that they bring forward. But if you look at affordability alone, it's not an end-all means. You can have the most affordable programs coming forward, but if they're not executable and they're not set up for success in delivering capability to soldiers and to our Army on the timeline that we require, then affordability isn't going to cut it. It's got to be executable as well. You have to have both. So some of the examples of questions when PMs bring programs forward for review, initial reviews per se, some of the questions that we would address with them in terms of executability might be, what's the maturity of the technology today, and what do they anticipate the maturity might be? What are the risks associated with developing the technology? What is the right balance of risk that both industry and the government should accept? What are the best incentives we could provide to industry that will help both of us going forward, mutual benefit? And how long will it take to get it into production? And if we look at a development cycle, how long should that development cycle be? Because if you look at each program, each one is going to be unique in some kind of way. So you're going to have to look deep at what we're asking the industry to do, where the technology is, and how that is going to translate into risk for cost, schedule, performance. And once we've done that deep dive analysis, then we can begin to put together the acquisition strategy and the timelines for various reviews, etc. This is one of our major challenges, I believe, that we face today, is making sure that we get it right. And we can't do it alone. Again, it's going to take industry's help for us to be able to get this as right as we can, because at the end of the day, our soldiers are depending on all of us to be able to deliver capability to them so that they can be successful on the field of battle. I'll mention one example. There's really two good examples, ground combat vehicle and JLTV, that Ms. Hsu mentioned. But I'll focus initially on GCV. And many of you know that we underwent a significant review of requirements trade-offs, and as a result of that, we pulled back the original RFP, went through a series of reviews and redesigned the acquisition strategy. As we executed the current program, current phase TD and GCV, we looked at a lot of things. We looked at key knowledge points where we went all the way back to senior Army leaders to include the vice, the under, the chief, and the secretary of the Army. And we gave them brief facts on the status of non-developmental vehicles, the analysis of alternatives, dynamic update, where we stood with both contractors going forward with the TD phase and the feedback that we got from that. And all of that helped us get after refining the requirements, which is currently being incorporated within the capability development document that's in for final review by the Joint Staff. That has led to our ability to really get after reducing risk in terms of cost, schedule, and performance relating directly to technology risk. It has helped us tremendously, and I'll mention just three key areas that we focused in on: system survivability and force protection, availability and reliability of the system, and lethality. So let me shift quickly to test efficiencies to talk a little bit about that, because that's another key area where the Army can really use the help from industry to help us drive greater efficiency inside our programs. We are looking very closely at the cost of testing within, and not just a few programs that are ACAT 1Ds or 1Cs, but many programs today. And we need your help in one area in particular, and that's developmental testing. We need to take greater advantage of the DT testing that we are doing. We have not done that as effectively as we could have previously. It doesn't make sense that we would go forward and duplicate within government testing what industry has already done. So let me focus in on one program where we really took this on. And a little bit of history is Paladin PIM, the Paladin Integrated Management Program. The history of this program has really been long. But in the last couple of years, when we had the program really realigned and going forward, driving toward a milestone C in June of 13, about 2 years ago, as a result, direct result of the CR, we were not able to buy the number of prototypes that the Army needed. We needed 10 prototypes, and the CR limited us in funding, so we could only buy 7. Another way of looking at that is that was a 30% reduction in the systems that we had to complete all the testing. So if the Army was going to stay on track to be able to execute the PIM program and keep June 13 milestone C on track, we had to do something in testing. So we took this on. We took it on with the PM, with industry, that was BAE York, with ATEC, DOT&E, TRADOC, AMC, our staff, and ASALT. All of us looked deep at how we could improve our operations and drive down test cost. And that was about a 60-day effort. And we had to do that. We did it out of necessity, not by just simply looking at a program and to see how we could be more efficient. We were doing some of that, but it was out of necessity to keep this program on track. So what did the team accomplish when they did the deep dive into testing? Some of the things that we achieved were, we were over 23,000 rounds to be fired to validate this system through OT. We reduced that to below 16,000 rounds, a significant reduction. We saved over $15.7 million. We saved over 13 months of various test times at various ranges. We also looked at other programs where we could incorporate tests and do both of them at the same time. So we were going to do a separate OT for Excalibur. Many of you are probably familiar with that system itself. We saved $4 million in the Excalibur program and 2 months of test time by coordinating that event with the Paladin PIM test that was being conducted at UMA. And the result of that is acceleration of both programs, but in the case of PIM, we were able to sustain keeping the milestone C schedule currently at June of 13. So some of the other results that we achieved with PIM, there were 27 test efficiencies that we implemented that saved range time and dollars. Industry helped us identify those efficiencies. For the GCB program, I'll just mention it, we achieved about 8 test efficiencies. And that alone saved us about $8 million in 2 months of test time. I already mentioned Excalibur. There was 19 different efficiencies for Excalibur and 4.1 million. Bradley ECP, we found about 30 million of savings in test efficiencies going forward. We continue to work that with DOT&E and with ATEC with great success to date. I have personally spoken to the leaders of DOT&E, Mr. Sayer and Mr. Daly, and both of them are working closely with us on many of these strategies. So some of the lessons from this, as I close my comments, let me just walk through quickly some of these things that we've learned or that we can do. We must leverage all available data sources when we look at testing. That's DT and OT. Review operational requirements for validity and impact on the test program. We've learned some hard lessons in JLTV and again in PIM in terms of how the requirements are driving our test strategies. We must determine the level of program maturity and correlate that very carefully with test requirements. We must use the configuration steering board to address test requirements based on system performance. Lieutenant General Keith Walker, who's probably there with you, has addressed that numerous times with us in ASOL, and we can leverage what the CSB brings and what TRADOC does in bringing requirements forward to the G3 and to the Army staff for validation. We're working this very closely together. We can consolidate testing at a single test site rather than going to numerous test sites. And then we can combine test objectives that I said earlier about leveraging DT and OT and not duplicating events. For everyone there, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I really hope this has been valuable for you. For many of these areas that we're talking about, we need your input. So we would ask for you to get back to the PMs, the PEOs, or to Ms. Camarillo, Ms. Miller, or myself, or Harry Green, or Kevin Fahey there. Drop them your notes, stop by and see them after this session, share your thoughts with them, or send us your cards and letters, because we absolutely need your ideas going forward in this era of constrained resources. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Bill. We'll transition to the stage now and hear from General Green.
Thanks, Tom. I was a little worried coming in here. Kevin and I were going to have to fill an hour and a half, and my stress went down when the tape from Ms. Shue came up. Went down a lot more when the VTC presentation started. Got a smile on my face when I heard the wind chill was 27 degrees in D.C., but I do need one more thing to make the stress completely go down. We're going to have to fill time at the end if you guys don't ask questions, so he's right there. Please grab a card, make Fahey and I and the people who were suffering in 27-degree weather earn our keep. My part of this presentation is to talk a little bit more about how we're actually implementing better buying power and the results. I think you should know that the reason Ms. Shue's not here is that she's at an offsite with Mr. Kendall, the Defense Acquisition Executive, and the subject is better buying power. So this really is something that we're taking seriously, and we're keeping a continuous look on affordability and better buying power. We track our progress in better buying power in reviews we do on all ACAT 1 and 2 programs at the department level and on ACAT 3 programs done by the PEOs. So every program is getting looked at for this once a year. We're particularly focused on moving programs from the will cost, or what things would cost if you didn't do anything out of the ordinary, to should cost, how we can make it cost less. And that's actually paid dividends, real dividends. Our savings in FY12 was approximately $370 million that we could point to where we had concrete savings, and we expect more in future years. Our projection right now is $2.5 billion in 13 to 17. You heard about some examples. I'll hit a few. Let's talk about Net Warrior, which started out using a purpose-built system, went to a LUT in November of 2010. We realized we needed to change the program. We used the configuration steering board to restructure it and multiple trips to the NIE to get the requirements right. We've moved to using commercial hardware, and that's reduced our procurement costs by about 65%, or a savings we expect of about $880 million between FY11 and 17. Again, real money that we're really going to need. Ms. Hsu talked about the M885A1 and 856A1 ammo, the enhanced performance rounds. We improved performance in production, insourced, and went to common parts and saved $34.8 million last year. On Stryker, combining two different variants, saved $17.7 million, which we used to accelerate a second BCT's worth of DVHs, and $12 million in test efficiencies. Again, real money. And then we have multi-year procurements. On TOW, we saved $11.7 million. On Black Hawk, which was awarded last year, we expect a cost avoidance of nearly 16%, or about $1.4 billion in costs avoided over the life of that contract to both the Army and the Navy. And we have a similar story in CH-47. In the first multi-year contract, we saved about 10%, adding up to about $535 million. We have a second one ready to award. Unfortunately, since it's a multi-year contract, and that has to be authorized and appropriated by the Congress, it's in a hang-fire status right now, waiting for this continuing resolution thing to get settled. But when we do get to award it, it's going to be about $3.4 billion with a savings of $810 million, nearly 20% from the expected cost. Certainly, that's real money. One more thing I'd mention quickly. We're trying to leverage all of the equipment that we bought as QRC capability where it's appropriate. So right now the department's going through a very deliberate process of looking at all of those quick reaction capabilities, and we're categorizing them. We're going portfolio by portfolio as either items to maintain, which are things that had value in the current fight but we don't necessarily see as long-term. They'll be maintained till the end of the fight with OCO funds, and we'll retire them. Areas where we're going to invest, where the capability is something we want to keep, we'll maintain the current with OCO, and then we'll replace it with something that we'll develop using the investment accounts, RDT&E, and procurement. Items we're going to sustain, where we're going to take them from the war fight and put them into enduring funding streams, so we'll get the benefit of that capability. And finally, items we're going to divest that we're not using anymore. But we're really trying to make an opportunity to leverage all that we've learned and all that we've bought over the past few years. So this is really part of our culture, part of where we're going, and I really look forward to answering your questions, because a couple of you ponied up to the bar. I watched him. He's counting them over here. And Kevin and I and our friends on VTC are anxious to answer your questions, so I look forward to that. Thanks.
Thank you, Harry.
I'll be quick.
Kevin, you're up.
All right. So the good news is the VTC and video worked, right? So you got to see most of my supervision, and so if I don't behave, it's their fault. The bad news is General Green had been sitting here for about a half hour writing jokes just for fillers, just in case. And that's the stress that I don't have, because I don't believe most of those were appropriate for this audience, but I guess we'll never find out. So I'll just add a few things so that you guys can ask General Phillip some really hard questions when we're done. Most of you know Better Buying Power 1.0 was released September 10. And I will tell you, as a PEO forever, an acquisition guy, I didn't see a lot of stuff in there that I didn't say, really, right? What I would tell you is, in a lot of instances, is when you start asking people to report what they're doing, they pay attention, right? And when supervision makes it a priority, you make it a priority. So in a lot of cases, I'll tell you, we started reporting the good things that we were doing. And then if you look at in 2.0, which really went out for people to look at late last year, it was really more detail in addition to the workforce piece. And what happened in the 1.0, in some instances, what Dr. Carter said is, in his memo wasn't exactly what he meant, right? And so if you ever went to a meeting with Mr. Kendall or Dr. Carter and said, I'm doing this because your memo said so, he would kill you. Because really what it's all about from a program perspective, it's doing the math, right? It's doing the hard work so you understand the analysis of everything about your program, right? So that someone can't ask you a program that you don't know the math. And then once you know the science between, the cost schedule performance of the requirements, you could make the requirements and the program balanced. And then you can come up with a good, effective acquisition strategy and have a good program. So I would tell you, in any instance, if you said you did it because you thought he wanted it, he would kill you because he was looking for you to do the math and think through the process. I'd also just give you a quick, some other ways to look at things. In some instances, you heard Ms. Hsu and Ms. Miller talk a lot about the 30-year plans and portfolio management. We're doing a tremendous amount of work on how do we look at portfolios, which really is an investment strategy, not only programs and how programs go together like a tactical wheeled vehicle fleet, but in some instances, and I'll give a quick example, we're looking at capability portfolios. For example, we've done a lot of work on the analysis of a base camp, right, and started looking at that capability as a portfolio in addition to things like the tactical wheeled vehicle fleet or the aviation fleet. So we start looking at it in all different ways to help us prioritize and do the right things. Another area which I think is a biggie, which Ms. Hsu mentioned, is operational energy. It's a good example. It may not even be on an acquisition program. In operational energy, I tell you, in a lot of instances, it's cultural, right? Is turn off the light when you leave the room, right? It's the things that you're seeing now. We're doing a lot of operational energy things because we have to, right? I think you'll see bases shutting down lights during weekends, right? In some instances, we need to do a better job of monitoring when things are used or not used. So in operational energy, sometimes it's thinking through and thinking things over on how do we do things more effective and efficient. The other thing I tell you, it's in everything we do. When you look at it, we're going to spend a lot of time on better buying power or efficiencies in retrograde because we got to figure out how to get all that stuff out of Afghanistan, and we know it's not going to be easy. So retrograde, reset, recap, acquisition programs, everything we do needs to go through that process. I also tell you is when we get down to having no money, we try to be more efficient, but what I would tell you from where I sit, in a lot of instances, the bureaucracy gets worse. Right? Because people want to make sure that you're doing the right things when you have no money. What I would tell you, between us and industry, we absolutely got to think innovative ways to be more efficient and how to do things right. And I think, as General Phillips mentioned, there's no idea that's a bad idea, and we won't do this together. I could go on program after program because I do that all the time, but I'll save time so you could ask General Phillips really hard questions.
What a guy you are.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, we'll now move into some of the questions and answers. We obviously have some very good ones here from the audience also, and Mike, if you have any more, please bring them up. The first one for General Phillips. Are there any should-cost initiatives that seem to be the best-of-breed solutions for driving the costs down that you'd care to talk about?
Tom, thanks. That is a great question. And I think Mr. Fahey talked a little bit about this. There's not one cookie-cutter solution that will fit any particular program. What I think is so important when you look at should cost is that each PM that's managing that program has to look at it holistically. And if you're really going to do a good job with should cost, you've got to team effectively with your industry partner. And you got to look at it almost from the bottoms up and look at the details associated with the technical risk of the program, the requirements, the test strategies, all those things that make up the program holistically. And as you almost build it up from the very beginning, its lowest elements, all the way up to the program itself, you'll come to a conclusion on what are those areas that could best that we could best bring forward that would help drive efficiency in this program. The PMs and the industry partners have to work this together, in my view. It can't be done in isolation or alone. Some things you can look at is as you deep dive into the requirements, like for PIM, why are we requiring over 23,000 rounds to fire out of this tube that the Army has been using since 1996? Does that make sense? Not until we worked with Fort and with BAE did we completely understand what was driving that test requirement to fire so many rounds out of the tube that has existed so long. You have to dig into the details of that. You have to look at and find out if there's gold plating within the requirements and to dive deep within that with the industry partners to be able to understand it. Another one is, as you look at the requirements in the acquisition strategy, is there a way to build an incremental capability to get an initial capability out, and then those things that may not be as mature, tying them in later within the program itself? That'll drive down your cost. When you look at GCV and how we drove it down from over 20 million down to around 9 to 10.5 actually, we did that through looking at also considering incremental strategies. So Tom, in a nutshell, there's not one way to look at it that this is like a cookie cutter solution to making it happen. It's got to be smart people looking at the excruciating details inside that program to bring it forward.
Thanks. And Harry, you wanted to add to that?
Tom, I just say that we could also put the question a different way, and you didn't ask it in the audience, but I'll assume you asked it, which is, how can you help us with affordability? And I think there's a bunch of things that industry can do for us. Number one is that there really has to be a dialogue between the government and the contractor. And we have to understand what's driving the costs in the program, things like where are the price points, so that we can make smart investment decisions and understand what drives it and where we could get efficiencies if we went at it. I think another thing that we would ask of industry is, we owe it to you to give you draft requests for proposal and to put out RFIs to find out what the art of the possible is. And we'd ask for your honest feedback on that so we can shape programs to do smart things, because certainly you have a lot of knowledge that we'd like to get at. We'd love to see you participate in the NIE and similar events, similar experimentation, where we're trying to refine the requirements so we get it right and so we understand what's the art of the possible and what the costs are as we ramp our requirements up and down. And the last one I'd give you is the one General Phillips talked about really looking at how we can get efficiencies in the test process by leveraging what you're already doing or what we're doing in other programs or what you're doing for other customers, so we don't end up paying for it twice. We really are looking for your help. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Ms. Miller, here's one for you. What are the government's thoughts around bridging the gap between the requirements and acquisition community to better define requirements and improve and build more precise evaluation criteria to support cost and performance trade-offs?
I think, as you have heard, we have been taking on the challenge of having achievable requirements. And very often when requirements are written, it is kind of a full look at all the things we want to have a system do. At the end of the day, what we've been doing is partnering with the Training and Doctrine Command and bringing in our science and technology expertise throughout our community and helping to inform those requirements development so that they are achievable and not just, you know, a thought process of somebody's got a great idea, but these are laws of physics achievable within a reasonable time frame. The real nut to crack is affordability, because at the end of the day, we can scope the requirements for what the Army needs, but we execute programs to what the Army can afford and meet as much of those requirements as possible. So from an S&T perspective, we are helping to better define and inform the requirements development process. As part of that, these technology demonstrations that we've been doing on our side, on the S&T side, help to inform what requirements can and should be. because we've proven it can be done.
Thank you. Kevin, could you tell us about how the JLTV team leveraged BBP and should costs through the TD phase in EMD?
Yeah, most of you know the program JLTV. JLTV really started back with Mr. Young's initiative of competitive technology development, right? And it's a lot of what the questioner was just asked. At the time, the mentality there was make the requirements tough, and let's do a TD phase and competitively, and then we'll narrow the requirements and decide on the requirements that we can execute an EMD program to cost schedule performance. So a lot of it started with the analysis of 3 TD contractors, and by the end of that phase, there wasn't a question you could ask that we didn't have the math to, right? And then we got into the situation of, okay, what do we believe we can afford for JLTV? And from an Army perspective, we decided it was about $250,000. And I will tell you, because we had the math, we could do the cost-informed trades. And once we did that, consistent with what we thought was affordable, we believed that now that program was actually a low-risk, high-maturity program, right? And so then you could change the development program, which was a typical 4-6-year EMD phase, to really build and test program, right? And that's the program we're in right now. There were a couple real key parts to the program. One is the partnering with both the combat developer and industry. Through the TD phase, we had 9 knowledge points, which we put all that information on the web to tell everybody how those requirements were changing over time. We also, part of that was we had a brief out at TRADOC every knowledge point to decide how they were doing. The engagement with industry, what I would tell you, was really industry. We had industry days all the time, and we engaged with them over the web. We also had the typical government contract. Most of you are probably not familiar. We had something that was unique, where we actually had the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army and the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps have their own industry day, because they were hearing different things from individual industries than we were telling them the math said. Right? And so after having that industry day, they heard, you know, this contractor thought a little different than that contractor, not because they weren't telling the truth, is because the concept they picked and the development they picked looked like this, and the concept over here looked like this. So they actually believe this, what we had been telling them now is a cost-effective program to give them a capability that they wanted. And after that day, the Commandant of the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps and the Vice Chief of Staff were the driving forces to get that program through the milestone. So it was really having the math to make the right cost-informed trades to come up with a what we believe is an acceptable risk program that we believe we can execute on schedule as long as these fiscal uncertainties allow us to.
Thank you. Here's a question that came in over the web live stream, and this is open to anyone. In the area of contracting, what have OIF and OEF taught the Army about how best to keep building the workforce? I'm thinking particularly about the BBP 2.0 areas of incentivizing innovation and improving tradecraft.
General Phillips,
Tom,
that's a tough question, so Kevin said you have to take it.
I'd like to defer to Kevin and Harry on this one, but that's a great question. Number one thing that we learned out of OIF initially, and then later in OEF, is that we have to have an expeditionary contracting capability inside the Army. Previously, we had relied upon primarily the Air Force, who were subject matter experts in this field and have been for many years. But the Army learned that if we're going to go and take on efforts like OIF and OEF, we have to have that capability resident inside the Army. So we've done extraordinary work. AMC has done extraordinary work to build contingency contracting capability. It is so critical to us today. I tell you, I just came back from Pacific Command, and I was in Korea visiting with the 411th Contracting Support Brigade that's over there. Fred Puthoff commands that. And later on, I was with Marty Zabura in Hawaii with the 413th Contracting Support Brigade. They are doing amazing work. And they're not just doing contingency contracting or what you might consider that. They're doing critical contracting activities for the USFK Commander, General Thurman, in the case of Korea, and for USRPAC and PACOM and across the PACOM theater of operation. So we've built this incredible capability that is now being employed essentially by every COCOM commander. We cannot go back to the way that the Army existed in 2002, 2003. When we initially went into Iraq in March of 2003 and learned some bad things about how the Army wasn't prepared for contracting, we absolutely cannot repeat that. What we have to do, though, in keeping in line with better buying power, you mentioned it, improved tradecraft and acquisition of services, contracting is going to play a key role in that. I'll give you another example, Tom, real quick. 61 cents of every dollar the Army spends is on services contracts. 61 cents of every dollar, 61%. So if we're going to achieve savings and partner with industry to be able to do that, then it's our contracting workforce that's going to have to take that on. And they're going to be the ones that are negotiating that and achieving those savings. But it goes beyond the contracting personnel. It also extends to the requirements community and the commanders that own that service contract or establish a requirement for it to be able to make sure there's no duplication. It's absolutely essential and our requirements are right and we can work all that together. So it ties back directly into better buying power. I'll stop there and let anyone else answer. Oh.
And sir, I'd also point out that one of the things we've done is we've learned that we need to embed contracting as part of our routine operations. So now you see that we've tied contracting brigades to ASCCs so they're available, they can be part of exercises, because we realize that we're going to have a contracted presence on the workforce and it provides an essential capability. I think the other thing you would notice is that we've made a concerted effort to build that contracting workforce. And I'll add on a little bit, General Phillips talked about services. I think the question may also go a little bit to what have we learned about how to do rapid acquisition in OIF and OEF. And certainly we've done a lot of quick reaction capability. We've stood up the rapid equipping force. And right now one of the things that we're doing at the department level is making decisions on how we instantiate that capability to do that for the long term. Certainly we won't have the demand signal once we come out of Afghanistan that will drive that, but we will have some demand, and we need to be able to have that ability to rapidly turn capabilities to meet immediate needs and to be able to ramp that up should conflict come again, and that's what we're building the plans for. So we've learned those lessons, hopefully, and are putting in place processes to take that into consideration for our future.
Thanks, Harry. Next to Ms. Miller again. Appears that RDT&E funding is less at risk than other funding lines. How do you see implementing the RDT&E money that you have? Any changes in strategy in the upcoming perfect storm for RDT&E funding shortfalls in the short term and the long term?
It's an interesting question. With regards to sequestration, we are as at risk as everything else because sequestration is strictly a percentage allocated to every program element. From the other contacts, if sequestration didn't happen, wasn't out there, if we didn't have to worry about continuing resolution, and you looked at the science and technology funding, and that's not all of RDT&E, but it's just the science and technology portion, yes, we do have organizations out there that seem to be providing us some level of protection. The Office of Management and Budget provides some guidance on defense planning guidance that tells us that the Army must maintain 0% real growth in our budget activity 1, basic research, and budget activity 2, applied research. We have the Office of Science and Technology Policy out of the White House that also tells us they want us to maintain a strong science and technology base to be able to enable the future of, in this case, the Army, and in fact, the future of the Department of Defense. So we do have some, I would say, top cover in a perfect world. how we are expending those resources wisely, that is something that I would tell you the 30-year strategy is helping us facilitate. Because now we have everybody helping to look at the science and technology portfolio. It's not just our enterprise, it's looking at making good steward decisions. It's a larger Army enterprise, and in some cases the DoD enterprise, that helps us to pick the right technologies to invest in. That's where we've been asking industry and academia, our foreign partners, our other services and agencies, and certainly our FFRDCs to come and join us in this discussion to make sure we are doing the best possible expenditure of resources for developing technology for the future.
Thanks. And General Phillips, here's the last question of the day. There seems to be a significant trend towards longer and longer development and evaluation periods, many exceeding a year, for many multi-award IDIQ service contracts. What can industry expect to see being done differently? And also, will the furlough of civilian workforce also impact your contracting civilian workforce?
I think for the question that relates to the evaluation of requirements or efforts that the Army needs through the source selection evaluation board process, I assume that's what they're potentially referring to, and finally getting to a contract award. I think we can do much better on that. And I think Mr. Kendall and Ms. Hsu certainly expect not just the Army, but the services as a whole to do better. And I think you'll find us, Harry Green mentioned it earlier, and I just want to say this because he said something that's important. And what's important is getting the key information out to industry as soon as we can. And I think in the past, looking over the last 3 years that I've been in this job, we've been somewhat hesitant to get the draft RFP out because we want to get it better and get it better and get it better. And then we want to make sure that all our bosses, all the way up the chain of command, are in concurrence with us releasing a draft RFP. I think we need to take some risk in that area, and we probably will in the future, in terms of getting the requirements out and the drafts out earlier to industry so that they can review it, comment on it, and we can get real comments back and real input from industry so we can do the process or execute the process a little bit better, define it quicker, and get to an award much sooner. That's really a quick answer to the question, Tom, but I think it's important for us to streamline the processes as much as we can and to engage earlier with industry. And I'll go back to one thing Kevin said as well, Mr. Fahey, on JLTV. We did something that was incredibly unique in terms of engaging with industry that allowed us to get more clear insights into what industry could do and what our requirements were really laying out for the Army and for the Marines, and to drive to a more efficient, more effective solution. And you heard Ms. Hsu in her comments talk about 48 months plus down to 33 months, which is really a build and test strategy that Kevin laid out so eloquently earlier. So we can do better on the process itself. For the second part of the question, I'll likely defer to Mr. Camarillo for a response.
Thank you, General Phillips. The second question relates to the impact on the contracting workforce of any potential furlough of civilians. And I'll echo what Ms. Hsu pointed out at the outset. As all of you know, the Army faces a significant predicament given the way that the sequestration law, the Budget Control Act, is applied. We have a $6.34 billion reduction in our OMA accounts. That's added to the fact that we have about a $6 billion shortfall under the current continuing resolution in OMA as well. It's going to place a significant amount of pressure on our ability to meet these shortfalls for the remainder of the fiscal year. So the Army and Department leadership have directed all organizations within DoD to look at a variety of measures to try to implement potential mitigation strategies. And as many of you know, one of the ones that we're looking at right now is a potential furlough of DoD-wide civilians. I think one of the plans is for 1 day a week for as many as 22 weeks of the year to accomplish, or I guess to address the shortfalls that we have in our OMA accounts. So If this mitigation strategy is implemented, it will surely affect the entire Army in its entirety, as DoD civilians form a critical part of just about every organization. Now, the question relates to what impacts will there be on acquisition and contracting specifically. Certainly, we think that there is a potential here for a perfect storm, because as Ms. Hsu mentioned earlier, to implement sequestration reductions in other funding lines and in other areas of our budget, it's going to potentially necessitate the modification and potential termination of contracts. So the number of contracting actions is going to go up significantly at the same time that we may encounter a shortfall in our workforce. So that's going to present some significant challenges for us in the coming weeks and months if, in fact, we have to implement these reductions.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our panel members for the informative discussion today and presentations, and I think we've all learned a whole lot more about better buying power. Thanks very much for your help.
Thanks, Tom.
These questions are really pretty.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
I will take them. Just didn't have enough time.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul George from Battelle, here to speak on one of the Tech 10, quick snapshot of new technology. I was asked to show something with action or whatever to hold your attention, but the fact of the matter is I'm talking about fuel cell power systems, and fuel cell power systems don't have very many moving parts.